I have to start off by saying that I think that Bocchi the Rock is a very good show. I gave it a 7 out of 10 and it made a spot in my year-end top 10. I really like it. But I've noticed that a lot of fans seem to like it more than I did. At the time of recording, it has a 9.02 rating on my anime list, which would make it the 12th best rated show of all time. And hey, if that's what people think, I have no reason to say that they're wrong, especially since I don't take Mal scores too seriously. But I have been seeing something else that I do take seriously. I've been seeing a lot of posts on Twitter and Tumblr from fans claiming that Bocchi the Rock is a better show than KON, and that's not just something that I can ignore. KON is a much better show than Bocchi the Rock, and I've crafted a Jenny Nicholson style list of 9 reasons why. Number 1, Yui is a better main character than Hitori. If you've watched videos on this channel before, you might already know that the aspect of a show that I like the most is how much I enjoy the main character. In the case of KON, one of the biggest reasons why I like that show is because I find Yui such an incredible main character. She is the funniest character in the show, she is the most magnetic, and she experiences a very satisfactory growth arc. Hitori, meanwhile, has a similar cultish following on the internet as does Yui, and I understand why. I don't begrudge any fans who identify with characters that display a debilitating social anxiety. And if people feel seen or comforted by watching Hitori's trauma, then that's fine. I fully respect and support that. But that doesn't make Hitori an entertaining main character to follow, at least from my perspective, and the next reason gets into why. Number 2, social anxiety is not funny. I definitely think that there's a space, especially in anime, to highlight characters who suffer from social anxiety. And there's a lot of anime that I love that features characters with a debilitating social anxiety, whether it's Sangatsu no Lion, or Liz and the Bluebird, or Wonder Egg Priority, or even from this year, Call of the Night. But all of those shows are dramas, and I like them more because I think that characters with social anxiety fit better in dramas than they do in comedies. I personally don't find it entertaining to frame social anxiety as something to be laughed at. And so when I watch Hitori act the way she does, I don't feel a caretaking urge or a sense of representation. What I feel is secondhand embarrassment, and all of her scenes feel pretty cringy. It may just be me, but I would much rather watch Yui act all goofy and happy than Hitori shy and debilitated. And it just builds into my third point. Number 3, Bocchi the Rock is in the wrong genre. I understand that my first 3 points are all kind of the same point, but bear with me here. I think Bocchi the Rock would be a much better show if it were a drama with slices of comedy than a comedy with slices of drama. It would give more weight to Hitori's condition and make me want to root for her growth instead of cringe at her moments that are framed as jokes. I feel like by passing this off as a straight comedy, the show wasted an opportunity to say something a little deeper about social anxiety and other mental illnesses. And it doesn't help that we spend most of our time with the character that is experiencing these really debilitating episodes. Luckily, Bocchi has more characters besides Hitori to latch onto, and that's really great because for me, the side characters are what makes this show so excellent. But it needs to be said, unfortunately, that... Number 4, KON's side characters actually develop. I feel kind of bad for including Bocchi's side characters on this list because they truly are my favorite part of the show, but they also serve as one-dimensional archetypes in a straight comedy instead of 3-dimensional characters that grow alongside our hero. And this just might be a function of time, as KON had 3 cores in one movie to develop its characters, and as of right now, Bocchi only had 12 episodes. But it's what we got, so that's what I have to judge it on. Just about all of our heroes in KON grow throughout the show. Mio learns to be a nicer person. Ritsu learns to be a more reliable bandmate and friend. Mugi learns how to better express her love for her friends. Azusa learns what really matters to her. And even Sawako-sensei, who's functionally the only adult in the show, learns how to be an effective role model. Everyone in Bocchi, however, with the exception of Hitori, just kinda stays how they were in the first episode throughout the entirety of the series. And that's not a bad thing. Nijika and Ryo are a wonderful comedic pair, as are Seika and Kikori. They all play their comedic parts perfectly, and they're what make the funny parts of Bocchi even funnier. And while that makes for an excellent comedy, isn't as satisfying as the growth that we see amongst good friends in K-On, at least in my opinion. And speaking of satisfying, number 5, the music in K-On is better. I realize this is just a matter of taste, and taste is different person to person, and I'm also willing to concede that the music in Bocchi the Rock is more technically proficient and impressive than the music in K-On! But the music in Bocchi kinda just sounds like anything you would hear on a J-Rock playlist. And if you like J-Rock, then you probably loved the musical moments in Bocchi, and even I liked quite a bit of the songs that were in the show. But in 5 years' time, if you played me a song from Kesoku Band without telling me where it's from, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you that it came from this show. Whereas if I listened to something from Hokago Tea Time, I would know exactly that it was from K-On! What I'm trying to say is that the music in K-On! Is much more distinct and age-appropriate than it is in Bocchi. Hitori writing lyrics about loneliness and alienation using very high-end metaphors is really cool and makes for a really bangin' rock song. But she's also like 15 years old. Where did all of this mid-20s angst come from? It makes much more sense for a 15-year-old to be writing a song like Fwa Time or Rice is a Side Dish. This is also a pedantic complaint because it's entertainment after all, but I have a gripe with how tight and professional Kesoku Band sounds. I guess it makes sense for Hitori and Ryo to be as good as they are at playing music since that's basically all that they've been doing throughout their adolescence. But to me, it makes no sense for this band to sound as good as it does being comprised entirely by teenagers who have only had a few months of practice with one another. It just feels a little weird for Kesoku Band to sound as adult and professional as they do. It's almost like having an out-of-body experience watching them while knowing that these are just 15-year-old girls living regular high school lives. Speaking of an out-of-body experience, number 6, Bocchi's CGI is weird. It can be both things. Bocchi's CGI can look very impressive and also look kinda weird. I appreciate the effort and skill that went into making the band's performances look as accurate and technically proficient as possible. That was probably a difficult and expensive process, one that most productions just don't do because it's not worth the time. And while it generally looks pretty good and certainly a lot better than most other shows that have tried this, I still can't really get over 3D CGI models in a 2D world. While the CGI generally does a really good job in rendering intricate details like Hitori's guitar solo or Ryo's slap bass, it also gives our girls a robotic look while on stage. No matter what song they're playing or in what tempo they're in or in what emotional state they are, all of our band members are sort of kind of swaying in time to one another. And this makes the CGI movement on stage look very unnatural to their mostly independent movements when they're not playing on stage. This doesn't ruin the performances for me because they still sound excellent and look pretty good, they just feel a little bit off. K-On, on the other hand, does not use CGI in any of its performance capture. And what it loses in the intricacy that Bocchi is able to present, it gains in making our characters look consistent from one moment to the next no matter what situation they're in. There is no regular Yui and performance Yui. Our characters look and feel and move the same no matter what setting they're in. And if all of that really was hand-drawn, that is a supremely impressive technical achievement by itself, especially since this was done more than a decade ago. And combined with the more distinct musical elements, I think this makes K-on's performances much more enjoyable than Bocchi's. Number 7, Bocchi's references aren't actually that interesting. This seemed like a weekly tradition of Bocchi doing some out-of-the-box animation or a reference to an old anime and fans losing their shit online. So much so that people use these gimmicks as a very sincere reason for explaining why Bocchi is as excellent as it is. And while this makes Bocchi stand out amongst its peers, I don't really think the creative sidebars or the allusions to old anime were honestly all that cool. I am glad that the show displayed a lot of creativity and levity with its production, especially amongst a sea of shows that just churn out the same thing over and over again. But animating something in a different style or referencing an old show is no different than what a show like Family Guy does on a weekly basis. And there isn't anyone out here calling Family Guy a masterpiece. I really like seeing claymation Hitori and paper sculpture Hitori and early 3D rendered Hitori, and then I just kind of forgot about it a few seconds after I watched it. Those gimmicks are fun, but they don't make or break a show for me, at least not nearly as much as plot and characterization and setting. And that's where KOns shines a lot more than Bocchi for me, especially in this next part. Number 8, KON has more memorable settings. One of the things I like most about KON is how the story consistently puts our characters in beautiful locations. Whether it's the school, or Yui's home, or Mugi's beach house, or the summer festival, our characters are always romping around in these very memorable places. And to its credit, Bocchi also has some great settings, whether it be the beach, or the cafe, or the waterfront. But we don't really spend more than half an episode in any of those places, and the only place we do spend a lot of time in is the Starry nightclub. That place is distinct and beautiful and wonderful, and I kinda wish we got to have more time in the other distinct and wonderful and beautiful places the show has laid out for us. But the only other places we spend a lot of time in are Hitori's school and Hitori's home. Hitori's school is kind of just a generic anime school, and her home, while pretty, is not the architectural marvel that Yui's home is. The setting is not as important to me as the main character when deciding whether I like a show or not, but it is often the thing I'll remember most about a show after I'm done watching it. KON's settings are consistently gorgeous, while Bocchi's are mostly unremarkable. And since we're coming to the end of this list, it's only fair that we talk about the end of each show. Number 9, KON has a more satisfying conclusion than Bocchi. This point might also just be a function of time, as we don't know whether Bocchi is going to get a second season or not, but if this really is the ending as it stands, then KOns was better. Bocchi's final stage performance I found especially lackluster because we were promised 3 songs but only got 2 thanks to another Hitori episode. And I didn't find much satisfaction in the conclusion of Bocchi's arc as she purchases a new guitar, which is something that happens very early for Yui and KON. KON, on the other hand, ended both of its seasons with some of the most emotionally impactful musical performances I've ever seen on television. They are immensely rewatchable by themselves and emotionally thunderous when you understand the context of the show. Bocchi's last episode is good. KON's last episodes are legendary. And that take just kind of goes for the entirety of both shows. Bocchi the Rock is very good. KON is a masterpiece. I'm willing to hang on to the possibility of Bocchi improving over time if it gets a second season, and maybe even getting better than KON as it continues. KON's second season was certainly better than its first season after all. But as it stands right now, I am far more interested than searching YouTube for performances from Hokago Tea Time than I am Kesoku Band. And if you like Bocchi the Rock more than KON, that is completely fine and respectable. Just know that I disagree. KON forever.